Welcome back to DellyMaths concept. In this video, I will be identifying the extreme values, where they occur, and what type they are, okay? So let us take a look at this. Let's take a look. So wherever we see the open circles, if they're not shaded, then nothing is going on there, right? That point doesn't even exist right there. Now, wherever we find places like here, something is going on here, something is going on here, something is going on here. And if we're including the endpoints in this, then we will take this into consideration as well, all right, because it's included in the endpoints if I'm using the domain that we're given. So, and these at the ends are always debatable. All right, we'll talk about it. Let us take a trip here. So we're going to be looking at the first case, which is this right here. So we're looking at a relative maximum. And why do we call that a relative maximum? If we go to the left of it, we have values that are lower than it. And if we go to the right of it, we have values that are lower than it. So at this point, right, where we could say where y is -1, so we're talking about we have a relative, and we're going to talk why we call it relative. So we have a relative max at, well, a relative max of 1, and we're having it at x equal to -2, right? So that's where it's at. It's not the highest point, obviously, because we're seeing where this would have been the highest point, and that is why it's relative, right? So we look at its surrounding, the things that are surrounding it. Here at -3, so if we take a look at -3 down here, we're definitely noticing that we actually have an absolute, we have an absolute minimum here because there is no other point that's actually lower than this point that we're looking at right here, right? So we have an absolute minimum of, it's -3, and it occurs at x equals 0, right? So where x is equal to 0, we're seeing that. Now, let's take a look. It is the lowest point in this area, and it's the lowest point for the entire graph. Now, you could see if we step to the left of it, we have values that are higher than it. And if we go to the right of it, we're seeing values that are higher than it, right? So we're looking at that. So it is the lowest point there in that region, as well as overall for the graph. So it is the absolute minimum that we're looking at. Now, so at 1 here, so we have an absolute max of 1, and it is occurring at x is equal to 2, where x is equal to 2. We're getting this right here. And as you can see, it's the highest point on our graph. Now, this point here doesn't exist there. As you can see, there's a hole there. So this is nothing here. But here, all right, if we're including the endpoints based on the domain that we have, then this is going to be a relative minimum of -2. So let's, all right, so it's a relative min of -2, and it occurs at x equal to 4. And the reason why it's included is in this is because I am including these endpoints here for the domain that I'm working with. It's always a debate with this one, and the reason is that I'm not able to check to the right of it. Definitely to the left of it, I'm seeing that the values are higher than it, but I'm not able to check the right of it, right? So generally speaking, some people may classify may debate whether or not this is a relative minimum here. But because I am including the domain that I'm working with, so it's the last, so I'm going to put it as a relative minimum there, right? But as I said, that one can be debated. All right, let us take a trip to the other question. All right, let us start off with right here. Now, this is a y value of -1. So I'm able to check to the right of it. The values to the right, they're greater, they're higher, they're taller than it. And the domain -5, I'm using the endpoints here. So it's, as I said, this one is debatable because I'm not able to check to the left, but I'm going to classify it as a relative minimum of, so it's a relative minimum of -1, and it did occur at x equal to -5. Okay, so that's right here we're dealing with. Now let's take a look at this other point right here. All right, so obviously it's not the highest point on our graph, so it has to be a relative max. Okay, now if you will look to the right of it, immediate right, we got values that are lower than this point here. And if we look to the left, we have values that are lower than it. So in regards here, it is a relative max of 1, and it's occurring at where x is equal to -1. So at x equal to -1, we're definitely seeing a relative maximum there. Now, and as we stroll across right here, we're noticing that we have an interesting area as well. So we're looking at a relative minimum because it's not the lowest point on our graph, right? So we're seeing a relative minimum right here. So let's take a look at it. When we step to the right of it, we got values higher than that green spot. And when we step to the left of it, they're higher. So this is a relative minimum at 0. X is 0, Y is 0. So it is a relative minimum of 0, and it occurs where X is equal to 0 right there, right? So we have that. Now, this is an absolute max. So we have an absolute maximum right there. We step to the left, the values are smaller, it's lower than it. We step to the right, it's lower than it. And it is the tallest point on this graph. So I do have an absolute max at, well, it is +2, and it occurs at 2, right? So it occurs at x is equal to 2 as well, all right? So that's that. And that's it for this, because this one is out of the game. It's an open, it's not shaded, so this is nothing here, right? And so basically that's what we're looking at, the extremas, and we were able to identify where they are. Like this video, subscribe to the channel and drop a comment. And look out for more of these videos. See you next time. Bye-bye.